What is the spiritual reason that America dominates the world at this time? And are we seeing the spiritual signs of an eventual downfall with the kind of crisis in the sexual abuse at Abu Ghraib, where American soldiers abused the Iraqi detainees in order to get information from them? But the abuse was not normal. The abuse was weird. And it does reflect many of the trends in American popular culture, unfortunately. Even though the president has said to the world, this does not represent America, we're going to have a discussion about whether, in fact, that's totally true. Unfortunately, there's a lot of stuff going on in America, mainstreaming to the world a different culture that the president doesn't like, but let's face it, it is what America is doing. We're talking with Rex Sexton, and we're going to be going into a fascinating subject with you, Rex, about where America and why America has the power it does that dominates the world.
It's pretty easy to prove that the people that today live in America and Britain and many of the other parts of the world, English-speaking parts like South of Africa, are really the descendants of a man called Joseph, who was one of the 12 sons of Israel. And Joseph had two sons, one called Ephraim, one named Manasseh. And there are many prophecies in the Bible where God said these peoples would scatter out across the globe. They would be a blessing to all the nations around them, all the rest of the world. They would have dominance over other nations.
Are you saying that America is great because America is a people of promise, that the Bible promised would be great, and is that true?
Yes.
Are we in the end times so that prophecies that are 3,000 to 4,000 years old about the end time are actually what we're living in now, so that America is part of the scenario of the end time?
Mm-hmm. One of the first prophecies about what's happening today occurred in Genesis chapter 27, where Isaac is blessing his son. He says to his son Jacob, "Let peoples serve you and nations bow down to you, be master over your brethren." So we have this beginning of what's going to be happening to the descendants of Isaac just in that one prophecy. And it continues in a thread and is repeated several times and expanded throughout the book of Genesis.
So America is a descendant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
Through Joseph, yes.
And Joseph.
And he says in chapter 28, "Your descendants shall be as the dust of the earth. You shall spread abroad to the west, to the east, to the north, and to the south. In you and in your seed, all the families of the earth shall be blessed." So we have this picture of these descendants really scattering around the globe and setting up really a system of blessing for the rest of the world.
Was this
and
done?
Indeed, we have fulfilled that.
Was this done anciently, or is this about the time what the Bible calls the end days, so that this is why America is now not the Israelites of 2,000 years ago or 3,000 years ago? Now America has its power.
Well, there was a nation of Judah and a nation of Israel. They were separate, of course, because Judah is simply one of the 12 brothers. And they disobeyed God. They did have a nation in the Middle East that lasted until about the year 586 BC, with Judah finally going into captivity. The northern 10 tribes went into captivity in the late 700s BC to a nation called Assyria, and then they migrated north, very historically documented very well, that they migrated north through Europe and up into northern Europe and northwestern Europe, and England, and finally many of those people migrated across the oceans to America.
So we are, thousands of years later, those folks. But that was those folks way back then, were they living in what the Bible calls the last days or the end days, or is that now?
The end days, to understand how that's calculated, it really begins at about the year 1800, because you go back to some of the prophecies in Daniel and other places. I don't have time to go through all of that. But beginning at about the year 1800, we find the fulfillment of what God said would happen in the last days to Joseph. Now this is in Genesis chapter 28, and I'm sorry, chapter 48. And he says to his kids, "I'm going to tell you what's going to happen in the last days." And so all of his children gather around him. And he says very plainly about Joseph, that Joseph would be great. It said that he would gather all around the world. In Genesis chapter 49, it mentions, in fact, chapter 49, verse 1, "I will tell you what shall happen in the last days. Joseph's a fruitful bough, a bough by a well, its branches run over the wall." So spreading out and populating other lands. "The arms of his hands were made strong by the hand of Almighty God. From there the shepherd is the stone of Israel." So we have this blessing of Israel coming down through Joseph and his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, which began to be very much fulfilled in the last days, which is the time in which we're living.
The Western world says it believes in Jesus Christ,
Yes.
and that Jesus Christ actually exists in heaven. Would you say that it is Jesus Christ then that has supernaturally blessed the United States?
Well, absolutely. In fact, there's the old comment where the old lady came to the preacher and said, "Wouldn't it be nice if we were living in Bible days?" Well, the answer is we are living in Bible days, because what we have seen fulfilled since the year 1800, with the huge ascent of America and Britain all over the world and being dominant during that time, is the fulfillment of Bible prophecy and promises that God made 3,000 years ago. So we're living in the time when God is still on his throne. God always keeps his word. It's impossible for God to lie. And we see he is now carrying out what he promised he would do centuries, in fact, thousands of years ago.